Hey, we're all set up on YouTube, and we will get started here in just about 1 minute. All right, give me 15 seconds here, and we'll begin. All right, well, let's get started. Welcome again to the Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspective on drought and hydrological conditions. This is, of course, the August 2026 edition, and welcome again. This is brought to you by the Kentucky Climate Center at Western Kentucky University in partnership with NIDIS, the National Integrated Drought Information System, and our partners at UK Ag Weather and the Kentucky Division of Water. And this production and delivery is a reflection of the many contributions by partners committed to serving the needs of the Commonwealth of Kentucky and its people. Our next regularly scheduled webinar will be September 3rd. That's a Thursday, and at the normal time. And this webinar is being recorded and on YouTube and being live streamed on YouTube. And so if you'd like to watch this again, we should have a copy available there in the archives. And just to kind of kick off here, we again, as you may know, we have cameras now at many of our, almost all of our Mesnet stations across the state, and there's still a few that may not get cameras due to various reasons. But um, just to kick off, we've got a few uh, images from those cameras for this month. As you know, it was a pretty wet month, which we'll get to. And because of that, we had quite a few storms and quite a bit of rain around, at least most parts of the state. Um, this was we usually show a picture from Harlan County. It's a nice picturesque spot. This is a picture near sunset, looking west. Uh, Beautiful sunset there. This is Franklin County. Nice rainbow there. Again, a lot of rainbows this month. I saw quite a few from our house, and quite a few showers around, especially for July. But a nice image there. This is a sunrise near Albany, Clinton County, not too far from Bowling Green here, and nice sunset looking west there from that site. And you'll notice the nice lush green field there, and that'll be a theme for this webinar. We have had a quite a nice wet July for much needed wet July for much of the state. And finally, Lewis County, a nice sunrise picture there with some morning fog looking almost due east. So without further ado, let's jump into the temperatures here. we were about 1.5 degrees above normal for the month of July. And the climate division one to the west was just under 1 degree above normal. And as you move east across the state, it got a little warmer with the easternmost division nearly 2 degrees, 1.9 degrees above average, above the 30 year average there. So for the most part, we were about 1.5 degrees above normal, and that places us last month as the 28th warmest July out of the 132-year record. And that tied us with 1966 and in 2016. And if we look at the average highs, they were actually pretty normal. In fact, some areas of the state were actually below normal on the average highs. And to me, looking back, it didn't feel all that hot, and that's the reason, because their daytime highs weren't actually too bad. But as we've seen the last couple of summers, it was our nighttime lows that were so high. And with that increased rainfall, more clouds across the state, we had that helped keep some of those nighttime temperatures fairly warm. So we were 2 to 3 degrees above average for those nighttime lows, which gave us that 1.5 degree warm anomaly for the state. Now, one question is, I've been here in Bowling Green for going on 4 years now, and it seems like every year is kind of the same. So I was kind of curious if we looked at the anomalies, temperature anomalies over the last 5 years, what that would look like. And now the graphic on the left is a little misleading. It's what we call maybe a stacked bar graph. Basically, each year is plotted on the previous year. And so it kind of exaggerates a little bit, it exaggerates the anomalies. But just from looking at that, you see we've had kind of an average January, maybe a little warm February, and then a really warm March, and then spring is closer to normal, a bump in July, and then maybe a more normal August, September again, and then you see a warm fall, October, December. And then when you look at the breakdown of year by year on the right, you really do see that at least in the last 5 years, that's not really long enough to call it a trend. Maybe it's just luck. But there do seem to be some similarities from year to year over the last 5 years at least. And you see we've had some cold Januaries, some warm Februaries, and then all 5 years have seen a warm March, and then even a warm April, and then a mixed May, maybe even a slightly cooler May, and 3 of those 5 years, and then January a little closer to normal, August pretty close to normal, a little bump in July, and then a warm fall. And so again, whether or not these are trends, we'll see. But if you've been thinking that our last few springs have been warm, but our summers have been pretty average, well, that would be true. It's a lot tougher to get much variation during the summer months, a lot easier to get a lot of variation during the winter time. So that's, you know, you have to keep that in mind when looking at these temperature anomalies. But nevertheless, it's kind of interesting to see just how warm it's been over the last 5 years. And I should say these are anomalies from our 1991 to 2020 averages. So these warm anomalies are on top of a recent 30-year record. All right, well, enough about temperatures. Let's move on to precipitation. And it was a pretty wet July over most of the state, like I've said. But it was pretty localized in some ways. The further west you go, the wetter it is. The further east you go, the drier it is across the state. And really, it was, if you divide the state in half, it's really two different. You saw two different Julys in some ways. If we look at the breakdown here, overall, we were about an inch above normal. For the state as a whole, we averaged 5.87 inches across the state, just over an inch above. It's 121% of normal for July. But if you go to the west, the Climate Division 1, which includes Paducah and areas to the west there, Jackson Purchase area, they were over 3 inches above normal. So, and you see the colors there in the map, 174% above average, of the average. And then the second climate division was also 1.6 inches above normal, 134%. But then you go, especially to the east or north of Lexington and Precip Valleys really fell off. The Bluegrass region was a half-inch below, just 91% of normal, and then Eastern Kentucky was just under 2/10 below normal, so close to normal, with 96% of average. Altogether, that put July as the 24th wettest out of our 132 years. But again, it really depended upon where you were in the state, and that western, particularly the Climate Division 1, really kind of skewed those statistics. And if we look at the last 3 months, May, June, July, you really see that kind of the similar pattern. Areas of central, western Kentucky were pretty wet, especially between Louisville to Lexington to really Bowling Green, and areas in between were quite wet, and areas to the west. And but again, northeast, eastern Kentucky missed out on a lot of that rainfall. Uh, they got a lot of it, so not that far below normal, but still drier compared to other portions of the state. And I was just kind of curious how we were doing compared to last year and compared to the average. If you start out in Graves County, you see so I should say what you're looking at here is cumulative precip going back to January 1st on the left. And the smooth green line, green bluish line in the middle is the average accumulated precipitation for that location, for that station. These are mesonet stations. And the red line is last year, 2025, a very wet year. And then the yellow line is this year. And if you start out in Graves County, you see they had a pretty significant deficit to kick off the year, but they've actually made that up over the last month or two. And so they're right about close to average now for the year. If we go up to Bullitt County, which has been pretty wet here lately, you see they also started off with a spring deficit, but they've more than made it up, and now they're actually running a surplus for the year. I don't think too many counties can say that, but they are, which is a bit of a surprise. They're of course haven't caught up to last year yet, but they're still pretty wet compared to where they were a couple of months ago. Now, if we go out to Morgan County in the northeast, you see they didn't start off with quite as much of a deficit, but they're kind of chugging along here with a deficit, but they're kind of staying on par with the average here lately, but still dry compared to average, and definitely far below where they were last year. And then kind of the same with Letcher County. They didn't have that spring deficit as much, but they have dried out relative to the average, and they're staying pretty dry, although they are getting some rain, similar to Morgan County. So it's kind of interesting to compare the east with the west across the state at this point in time. All right. Well, again, I was kind of curious how the last 5 years have looked. Have they been similar? And especially for rainfall, it just seems like we've had a lot of these dry spells with pretty wet, humid July. I know last July it was really humid, and it just seemed like that again. And sure enough, we do see some similarities across these 5 years. Um, Pretty wet January, pretty wet February, and then pretty dry March and April's, except for last year, of course. But if you take last year's flooding away, we've had some pretty dry springs over the last 5 years. And then May's a bit of a mixed bag, June, but all 5 years have been, well, 4 out of the 5 years have been pretty wet. And and a mixed bag again in the fall. And then it looks like kind of a dry October through December each of the last 5 years, or at least most of the last 5 years. So just kind of interesting trends. Whether or not you can call this a trend, I don't know yet, but just kind of interesting to see. Now, going on to looking at stream flows across the state, they're pretty good, pretty close to average. We're starting to see some below normal stream flows across the east, northeast, but for the most part, fairly normal across the state, or even a few above normal stream flows here and there, especially across central and eastern areas. And if we look at soil moisture, these are a couple of satellite estimates um, from this anomaly change here from CPC. You can see western portions of the state pretty moist, whereas portions of northern Kentucky are fairly dry. And we look at the crop chasma estimates, and we see kind of the similar pattern, pretty wet across central western portions of the state, but pretty dry or drying across eastern portions, especially the northeastern portion of the state. And keep that in mind as we look at a few Mesnet stations around the state. Starting again out in Graves County, again they had close to what 300% of normal for the month, and sure enough, we look at their soil moisture. They've dried out a little bit over the last week or so, but since the start of August, but they're still moist at all levels. Deepest level is completely saturated, and all the surface, all the other layers are pretty moist, especially compared to kind of where they were back in May. We look at Bullitt County again. They've had a lot of rain, although they've dried out actually a little bit over the last month or so compared to where they were. But so some drying in the upper layers, but for the most part, they've got adequate moisture at the lower depths, especially again where they compared to where they were back in even June or especially in May. Now, if we look to the east again, Mason County in the northeast, we see actually quite a bit of the drying. If we look at the upper levels, it's the driest they've been in the last 3 months, going back to April. And really, it 2, 4, 8 inches, and the 20-inch here is really the driest it's been in the last 3 months. So drying really at all levels in the northeast. Now, Letcher County, it's a little bit better in the southeast, actually. There's some drying, but for the most part, plentiful moisture still in those upper layers, especially compared to where they've been in various points over the summer. And so turning to drought, much improvement generally over our area across the Ohio Valley, stretching down through Texas up through the Northeast. So pretty good for August for this time of year. You see quite a bit of drying over the west and the Mid-Atlantic, but for the most part, for our area or for our region, it's pretty good. If we look at where we were back in May, wow, we had over 80% of the um, well, quite a bit of drought over Kentucky. Not much else in our region, but really focused on Kentucky. And then you look at where we are today across the region, and you see, of course, we've improved a lot, but now it's the northwest portion of the region that's starting to dry out. But for the most part, the region's in pretty good shape. If we focus on Kentucky here, again, over 96% of the state was in some form of dryness or drought. Over nearly 90% were actually in drought this time 3 months ago. Now, fast forward to today, and of course, much improved over much of the state. We do have a small portion of southeast Kentucky in drought. Again, based on those soil moisture values we just looked at, we might we'll be watching the northeastern portion of the state, although I haven't looked at the rainfall the last few days up there, but um, we'll see what that looks like next week. But for the most part, the state's in pretty good shape, especially for August, where we get our least amount of rainfall. Now, looking at the numbers, less than 20% of the state's in some form of dry soil, less than 6% is under drought, and 2 3/4% in D2 or above, pretty much just a couple of counties. But for the most part, again, we're much improved over where we were a couple of months ago. And again, this just shows the improvement over the last month on the left and over the last 3 months on the right. And it's been fortunate how we've been able to come out of that spring drought during our summer, which is, I would think, tough to do generally. All right, now moving on, because we've had above normal amounts of precip during July, we have had a few storms associated with that rainfall. This was a camera image from Christian County looking almost due north. It's not a tornado there, but it's a nice low-level scud along gust front there. Nice striations there in the clouds. But we did see for July, we did see plenty of storm activity. And I just had to throw this in. I wouldn't call it storm chasing, but there was a tornadic storm moving towards Bowling Green, and I just wanted to get south of it a little bit to see it. And so this is a picture looking north from Franklin, looking back towards Bowling Green. And when I took this picture, it didn't have a tornado warning on it, but it did have a warning not long before this photo. I think it had a severe warning on it at the time I took this picture, but it was kind of dying out, but it was still had some nice structure for what I've seen from here in Kentucky. And I just happened to get this nice cornfield in the foreground there. All right. Well, this was this is just a plot showing all the thunderstorm and tornado warning counts across the state. Uh, Added up going back to January, and I don't know if you can see my cursor there, but 2026 is right in the center of that. We really jumped up in a big way from where we were a month or two ago. We saw quite a few warnings for July, and that kind of put us up into the middle of the pack here for with over 500 combined warnings for the year, which we were quite a bit lower down here in the lower pack before last month. Now, if we look at just tornadoes, that's where we made our biggest moves. We jumped up here. We're now at 97 for the year. And so big jump for this time of year. And we'll get into some of those here in a minute. And if we just look at severe thunderstorms again, we're at over 400 for the year so far. Pretty much in the middle of the pack for this year. Now, here's a map of all the activity we've had in July. Pretty active, as you can see. Lots of wind reports across the state. Lots of heavy rainfall. A couple of tornadoes here. One in Butler County on July 9th in EF1. I was on the ground for a couple of miles. Pretty small, but still on the ground for a couple of miles. And but the big day was July 21st. We had at least 7 tornadoes. One of which was an EF2 on the ground for over 21 miles through Grayson and Hart County. Quite a bit of damage through there. I drove up there and saw some of that. Rooftops taken off. Lots of tree damage. Definitely, you can see kind of the path. It did cross 65, I believe, and you can see some damage from 65. But also another EF1 on the ground for 27 miles up in Carroll County. So, pretty long track tornadoes. Fortunately, they were just EF1s or EF2s, and not tremendous amount of damage, but still pretty clear damage from those. And then in Metcalfe County, another EF1. But you should see a lot of heavy rainfall as well, and that can create some damage of its own. Here's just a couple of the damage surveys in the Louisville WFO's region. You see the 20-mile path here through Grayson County, and the other ones are rather a lot shorter. Metcalfe County had two, an EF1, EF0, and then EF1 over here in Casey. Lincoln, Bourbon had an EF0, Hardin had EF1. And then Carroll County was up here in the Wilmington's area. So here's just some images from those storms. Here's some of the EF2 damage, the rooftop damage. Just east of Wax. I've not been to Wax, but it's along that path. EF2 winds. And then here's some EF1 damage there in Hart County. See the twisted nature of that nice healthy tree it looks like, but pretty twisted up there. And then some flood damage in Ballard County from July 10th. Quite a bit of damage, actually. I'm kind of curious just how much this would cost to repair these two roads. But you see they're completely washed out. And they had some pretty high rainfall amounts across portions of western Kentucky during the month. All right. Now moving on to ag, here's just a couple of photos from various Mesnet stations through the month. Again, we did have some pretty good rainfall over much of the ag areas of the state, and this is from the Henderson County station. Your sunset, you can see some crops there, some corn. Here's a nice healthy pasture in Marion County early in the day, or no, I guess near sunset later in the day. Here's a nice crop, Harrison County. Can't tell exactly what that is, but it looks like a nice healthy crop there. Nice layer of fog to start the day. And some corn in Adair County. Looks pretty healthy from what I can tell here. And whoops. What did I do? Let's see. Uh-oh. Just a second here. I just lost my... Oh, okay, there we go. And so looking at the crop report for the month, here we have corn and driving around, at least in the Bowling Green area, south central Kentucky. Corn looks happy, and sure enough, the statistics sort of point that out. This year's is as good as any in the last 5 years. And so it's, yeah, at least 75%, 70% is rated as good or excellent. So that's what we like to see, I think. Pretty happy results there. Pasture, it's recovered a long way from the drought we had in the spring, but over the last week or so, kind of taken a downturn. Maybe that's across portions of northeastern Kentucky. Still okay compared to where we were, but hopefully that can continue to improve a little bit from where we were. If we look at soybeans, very good, a lot like corn, maybe the best during from the last 5 years. Adequate rainfall, it seems like whenever we need it, pretty good weekly rainfall each week across much of the state, and that seems to be good for the soybeans as well. And winter wheat, this is kind of old news, but this is from last month. We kind of ended pretty low because of that drought we had in the spring, and that was the worst timing for the winter wheat. So that ended pretty poorly compared to previous years during the last 5. All right. Well, looking ahead, over the next 7 days, they're calling for really the most rainfall in the areas of the state where we need it the most. The further northeast you go, the higher the rainfall amounts, and maybe too much rainfall. They're calling for over 3 inches across portions of Ohio. So, um, but this should moisten things up pretty well over the next week, especially in the eastern half of the state. So this is good news. Lesser amounts across portions of the west, but we don't need it quite as much. So that should be good news for folks across the state. Now, looking ahead, the 6 to 10 day forecast, above normal rainfall for us is expected, and continued warm temperatures. I could use a cool down after the last few days, but well, looks like we'll remain in a pretty warm pattern in the 6 to 10 day outlook. And if we go 8 to 14 days out, same pattern, above normal precip, and then above normal temperatures. And then if we go another week out beyond that, 3 to 4 weeks out, equal chances for temperature, same with precip, a little less predictable. But with that above normal precip for the next couple of weeks, then um, another dry week in there wouldn't be too bad. Um, and then the month as a whole, above average temperatures and equal chances for precip, but the way it looks, given that the short-term forecast, I suspect we'll end the month above normal, with little drier conditions out in the plains. Now, if we look at the seasonal forecast, this is August through October, above normal temperatures and actually above normal precip. So not just August, but it looks like for the entirety of the fall, we'll remain in maybe a wet pattern for the state, for the Ohio Valley. And then if we look ahead at the seasonal forecast this winter, pretty much from now on, they're forecasting above normal temperatures for us. Maybe equal temperature chances for the western half of the state for the winter, but for the state as a whole, going forward above normal temperatures. And then part of this is just the long-term temperature outlook. Long-term temperature trends are included in these outlooks. So we've been warming over the last decade, and that's just kind of built into these outlooks. So until that trend stops, we'll continue, I think, to see above normal temperatures for much of the country. And looking at precip, the good news is that in some ways that the expected El Nino drying pattern isn't too overwhelming for us. Equal chances of precip for of course this later this fall and into through the winter, and maybe even above normal predicted for the southern half of the state. And it's not until spring that the northern half of the state is put in this perhaps below normal precip. And then looking out further ahead, just equal chances we'll be coming out of the El Nino and equal chances there. So the long-term outlook is kind of uncertain, but kind of good news, I guess, compared to what we could be seeing with this very strong El Nino. Speaking of El Nino, it looks like we have a 100% chance of an El Nino going forward. I don't believe we're officially in an El Nino yet, but we're on the cusp of it being declared. We're in an El Nino watch, I believe. And there's, for this fall, this winter, there's an 81% chance of it being a very strong El Nino, and only really a 20% chance of it not being a very strong one. Here's that strength forecast, and you see as we head into winter, the chances of it becoming a very strong El Nino are very high. And then as we come out of the winter, we expect that El Nino to decrease in intensity. And maybe eventually get into more of a neutral pattern later next year, but that's pretty far out. All right, well, switching gears, just looking ahead, stream flows forecast to be normal. No surprise there for the month. And then with drought, the outlook is continued improvement, especially over the eastern half of the country. Uh, the little remaining drought in southeastern Kentucky is expected to improve, and in fact, the whole eastern seaboard's predicted to vastly improve, if not get out of drought altogether. Um, which is good news for some of them. Some areas are in a pretty severe drought. So good news for them, but the western half of the country is expected to persist, or at least the central part of the country is expected to worsen a little bit. And wildland fire potential, that's expected to remain out west, so no surprise there. And just to summarize, we had a warm July, about 1.5 degrees above normal, 28th warmest on record. But the further east you went, the warmer it was. And that was mostly due to the nighttime lows. And of course, areas to the west had more rainfall, so that may have helped keep their temperatures a little lower. It was a wet July. We were about an inch above normal. 24th wettest on record, but again, that was primarily due to the western half of the state. Actually below normal precip for the eastern half of the state. The stream flows are good, soil moisture is good generally, and with a few portions of eastern Kentucky drying out, we'll have to keep an eye on. But again, the forecast looks good for them, so probably not a real concern going forward, especially if those forecasts hold true. The agriculture looks good, and pastures maybe taking a slight downturn here in the short term, but hopefully with that long-term forecast, they'll improve. And the forecast and outlooks both look good for Kentucky, with above normal precip in the short-term forecast, and even in the longer-term forecast for this fall, and even through the winter. And even with a very strong El Nino predicted, the conditions, the forecast for Kentucky look okay. And again, our next scheduled webinar will be September 4th on Thursday at the same time. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop and take questions. Thank you.
Doctor, this is Kevin Jeffries from Oldham County.
Yes, hi.
Just a couple of quick questions. I saw you all had your latest, I guess, 84th station put in Powell County. How many counties do you in Kentucky now do not have Mesonet stations?
We are up to, let's see, I want to say 81 counties now.
Okay.
And 87 stations.
Oh,
And
okay. Cool.
so we're 2/3 of the way there. So if you know anybody who's willing to host in a county that doesn't have one, then just let us know. But we are looking primarily at schools right now, but we're open to any place with level ground and a wide open area with no obstructions.
Okay. And one other question. I noticed that the Weather Service in Franklin County shut down their site. I guess it had been down for a year or whatever. And I guess they're using the Mesonet site now in the KSU. Is there more Weather Service stations being shut down or taken offline if they have problems with them, or what's the status on that? Do you know?
Boy, I don't. I know we've got a few. I think I don't know, Cliff, if you want to comment on that, or
Yeah, can you hear me?
yeah.
So yeah, it's a special situation out at Frankfurt because not only did the lightning strike shut it down for over a year, but it's also transitioning to an AWOS, which doesn't quite
Uh-huh.
meet the criteria for us to use as an official NWS climate site. So with that said, there are no other ASOS sites, I don't think, in our CWA that are on the chopping block, so to speak.
Okay. Well, good. That's good to hear. So, all right. Thank you all.
Yeah, Cliff, and was that an FAA decision to do that?
Yeah, I believe it was an FAA decision to transition from ASOS to AWOS. Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one thing about these interagency networks. You sometimes you don't have control over stations that everyone assumes you own, but you
Right.
share that. And so, yeah, good point.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
And just a note in chat, yeah, the Ballard County, yeah, 6 to 10 inches in some areas. So yeah, just tremendous amounts of rainfall in some of those storms, some of those days. And then Matt had a comment. Matt, I don't know if you want to comment on this, but you wrote in here prior to 2026, there were only 7 F or EF2 tornadoes in Kentucky since 1950. Let's see. Oh, you mean
In
July?
Kentucky, sorry. In July also.
In
Yeah.
July. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great point. Yeah.
I was just kind of interested. I was on NWS chat that night and some other folks on this webinar probably were too, but I remember John Gordon commenting that he had been in worked in Alabama, Kentucky for a long time. I forget there was one other state, maybe it was Tennessee, but just had never seen a tornado of this strength this time of year. And
Mhm.
lo and behold, looking at the data prior to 2026, it looks like there was only 7, maybe 8 tornadoes, depending on whether it crossed the Kentucky border across the state during the month of July. So um, that's 75 years now. So you're talking one EF2 tornado or strength or higher once every 10 years. That's pretty wild. So yeah. And it was on the ground for what, 20 miles. So
All right. Yeah. Yeah. And that reminds me, I should have showed a map of this, but there were a couple of days where our dew points were in the 80s. And I don't know how often that occurs, but I remember there were a couple of measurement stations with, I think I saw 85 dew points, which is pretty terrible. And I remember one of these storm events, those dew points were preceding one of these events, and I don't know if it was I want to say it was earlier in July, not the 21st, but pretty nasty days, as far as heat indices. Um, Shane, I don't know if you remember that or Zach, those dew points or how high they got across the network, but they were pretty brutal, even by Kentucky standards.
Yeah, highest value we saw last month was 85 degrees.
Yeah, yeah, pretty ugly.
I will say though, at least we had some breaks in the heat this July versus last. We did not have an appreciable break in the high humidity in particular in July 2025. And that's one of the reasons why it was a top 10 hot July for places like Louisville, Lexington, and Bowling Green, particularly because the minimum temperatures were just so doggone warm because the dew points were so high July of last year. This time, yeah, we did have some high dew points, but they weren't as consistently high as they were last July. So at least we got some breaks in there.
Yep.
Hmm. And that goes back to that map showing our daytime highs actually weren't that bad, but because that humidity was bad, it kept our lows pretty warm, for sure.
Yep. Our grass and pastures here in Oldham County they're growing like they did back in March and April. I mean, haven't been they haven't been this green for a long time.
Yeah, I don't remember having to cut the grass this often.
I agree. Every 3 or 4 days. Yep.
Any other thoughts, questions? All right, going once, going twice, anybody? All right. Well, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing everybody back here this time next month. So,
Thank you, Doctor.
yep, thank you all.
Thank you all.
Bye.